Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Earth Defense Station and watched the sky change color. The morning sun that had risen bright and yellow now looked dim and orange. Something massive was blocking its light. He pressed his face against the viewing window and saw shapes moving across the stars. These were not clouds or space debris. These were ships. Commander Morrison had spent 15 years protecting Earth's orbital space. He had trained for meteor strikes and solar flares. He had prepared for attacks from pirates or rebel colonies. But nothing in his training had prepared him for this moment. The ships coming toward Earth were bigger than cities. They moved with perfect formation like a school of metal fish, swimming through the darkness of space. His communication officer turned from her station with wide eyes. "Sir, we are getting signals from all across the system. Mars colony reports strange readings. The moon base says they can see massive objects approaching Earth." Jake grabbed his headset and called Mars Command. "Roy, what do you see out there?" "Captain." Roy Baker's voice crackled through the speakers. "Jake, I have never seen anything like this. There are at least 50 ships heading toward Earth. Each one is the size of Manhattan. They appeared out of nowhere about an hour ago." On Earth below, Dr. Lisa Kane was running through the halls of the Global Science Center. She had been studying radio signals from deep space for months. The patterns were too organized to be natural. Now she knew why. Someone had been listening to human communications. Someone had been watching them. She burst into the emergency meeting room where Earth's leaders were gathering. President Helen Cross looked up from a table covered with satellite images. "Dr. Kane, tell us what we are dealing with." Lisa spread out her research papers. "The signals I detected came from these ships. They have been observing us for at least 6 months. Their technology is far beyond ours. The energy readings from their engines alone could power our entire planet for a year." The president stared at the images of the approaching fleet. They hostile? I don't know yet. But they are not responding to any of our communication attempts. They are just coming closer." High above Earth's atmosphere, the alien fleet slowed to a stop. The largest ship positioned itself directly over the Atlantic Ocean. Its shadow fell across 3 countries. Inside the command center of this massive vessel, creatures unlike anything Earth had ever seen studied their new prize, High Admiral. Vextar stood before a wall of monitors showing images of Earth cities. His species had evolved on a world of constant warfare. They were tall and thin with gray skin and large black eyes. Their hands ended in sharp claws and their teeth were made for tearing flesh. To them, conquest was as natural as breathing. "Another primitive world," he said to his officers. "Look at their crude settlements. They have barely learned to leave their planet's surface. This will be easier than the Centauri system." War Champion Krilu stepped forward. "My lord, should we begin the usual demands for surrender?" Vextar waved a clawed hand. "Yes, but keep it simple. These creatures probably cannot understand complex language. Tell them they have 2 days to submit or we will destroy their cities." The message went out on every radio frequency and television channel across Earth. The translation was perfect and terrifying. "People of Earth, you are now subjects of the Zephyrian Empire. You will surrender control of your planet within 48 hours. Resistance will result in the destruction of your species. This is your only warning." Jake Morrison listened to the message from his station and felt his blood turn cold. He had seen war before during the Mars independence crisis. But this was different. This was not a fight between human colonies. This was survival against something that could erase humanity from existence. Dr. Kane worked frantically to analyze the alien broadcast. The signal was more advanced than anything humans had created, but there were patterns in it. Weaknesses, maybe? She began recording everything and running it through every computer program she could find on the surface. President Cross called an emergency session of the World Council. Leaders from every nation gathered in the underground command center. Beneath New York, the room was built to survive nuclear war, but everyone wondered if it could survive alien weapons. "We need options," the president said. How do we fight something we don't understand? Colonel Steve Hunter pulled up military reports on his tablet. Our satellites show they have weapons that can destroy our largest cities in seconds. Their ships have shields that our missiles cannot penetrate. If we fight them directly, we will lose. But in the back of the room, a young officer raised her hand. Lieutenant Kate Morgan had spent years studying military history. Ma'am, every empire in human history thought they were unbeatable. They all fell eventually. Maybe these aliens have never faced an enemy like us? The president looked around the room at the faces of humanity's leaders. Fear was there, but something else too. Anger, determination, the same spirit that had driven humans to explore space and build colonies on distant worlds. We have 48 hours to decide our future, she said. Do we bow down to these creatures? Or do we show them what humans are really made of? Outside, the alien ships waited in perfect formation above Earth's major cities. They had done this routine dozens of times before. Other species had always surrendered when they saw the hopelessness of resistance. The Zephyrians expected this conquest to be just as simple, but they had never encountered humans before. President Helen Cross stood before the emergency session of the United Earth Council. 200 leaders from every nation sat in the underground chamber. The alien deadline was 12 hours away, and the weight of humanity's future rested on this decision. We have heard their demands, she said. They want us to surrender our planet and become their slaves. They expect us to give up everything our species has worked for. They think we will choose slavery over death. The room was silent except for the hum of air recyclers. Above them, alien ships waited like metal storms ready to unleash destruction. Everyone knew the odds. Earth's military forces were nothing compared to Zephyrian technology. Dr. Lisa Kane had spent the last 36 hours trying to find any weakness in the alien signals. Her eyes were red from staring at computer screens, but she had found something important. Their communications show they have conquered 47 other worlds. Every single species surrendered without a real fight. They expect the same from us. Colonel Steve Hunter stood up from his seat. Ma'am, I have been in contact with our military commanders worldwide. Our soldiers are ready to fight even if victory seems impossible. No one wants to live as a slave to these creatures. The president looked around the room. We need a vote. All in favor of surrender, raise your hands. Not a single hand moved, all in favor of resistance. Every hand in the room shot up. The decision was unanimous. Humanity would fight. Dr. Amy Foster received the news while working in her laboratory beneath Colorado Springs. She had been studying pieces of debris from the Mars Defense Station that Captain Roy Baker had died defending. The alien metal was unlike anything on Earth, but she was starting to understand how it worked. We need more time, she told her assistant. If we can figure out how their shields work, maybe we can build weapons that can hurt them. Her team had been working without sleep since the aliens arrived. They were Earth's best scientists and engineers. If anyone could find a way to fight back, it was them. The alien response to Earth's defiance came swiftly. War champion Krulu led the first wave of landing craft toward the planet's surface. His soldiers were veterans of dozens of conquests. They wore armor that could stop any human weapon and carried guns that could melt through steel. Remember, he told his troops, these creatures are primitive, but they may try to resist. Kill enough of them to break their spirit, but leave most alive. We need workers for the mining operations. The first landing happened in New York City. Giant ships descended from the sky and troops poured out onto the streets. People scattered in panic, but some stayed to fight. Police officers with pistols shot at alien soldiers. Their bullets bounced off harmlessly, but they kept shooting anyway. Sergeant Dunwoods was commanding a National Guard unit when the aliens landed in Central Park. He watched his men fire everything they had at the invaders. Nothing worked. The alien shields absorbed every bullet and explosive. Fall back to the subway tunnels, he ordered. We can't hurt them out here, but maybe we can slow them down underground. Similar scenes played out in every major city. London, Tokyo, Moscow, Beijing alien forces landed expecting quick victory. But humans did not run and hide like other species had done. They fought back with whatever they could find. In Washington, D.C., the aliens surrounded the White House. President Cross refused to evacuate. She stood on the lawn with her security team as alien soldiers approached. When they demanded her surrender, she looked their leader in the eye and said, "You will have to kill me first." The alien commander was confused. Other species leaders had always surrendered immediately when faced with superior force. This was not following the normal pattern. High Admiral Vexstar received reports from all the landing sites. The conquest was taking longer than expected. Humans were fighting in ways that made no tactical sense. They used suicide attacks and fought to the death even when surrounded. This was not normal behavior for a defeated species. "Sir," reported one of his officers, "the humans are using their city structures against us. They collapse buildings to block our advance. They flood tunnels to slow our troops. They seem to know their own territory better than our maps show." Vexstar studied the reports with growing concern. The Zephyrian Empire had perfected conquest through overwhelming force and psychological intimidation. Other species saw their power and gave up hope. But humans seemed to fight harder when the odds were worse. Dr. Amy Foster made her first breakthrough while explosions echoed through the mountains above her lab. She had found the frequency that disrupted alien shield generators. It was chaotic and random, the opposite of Zephyrian technology, which relied on perfect order and control. "This is it," she told her team. "Their shields can't adapt to truly random patterns. We can build weapons that will work against them." Lieutenant Kate Morgan was trapped in the ruins of downtown Los Angeles when she discovered something important. The aliens' tactical computers could predict human military strategy, but they failed when humans acted unpredictably. When her unit broke formation and attacked from random directions, the enemy response was slow and confused. She radioed her discovery to military command. "They think like machines? They expect us to follow logical patterns, but we don't have to fight the way they expect." Around the world, human resistance began to adapt. Small groups used guerrilla tactics that the aliens had never encountered. They struck quickly and vanished into areas the invaders didn't understand. Sewers, subway systems, abandoned buildings, humans used every advantage their home planet gave them. Captain Susan Price led a group of survivors in the Nevada desert. They had salvaged equipment from a destroyed military base and were learning to modify it. "If we can't match their technology," she said, "we'll make our own rules." The first day of invasion ended with alien forces controlling most major cities but facing continued resistance. Vexstar expected organized surrender by now. Instead, he received reports of constant attacks from humans who should have been broken by the display of superior power. "Perhaps we underestimated their primitive courage," he told his war council. "No matter. Tomorrow we will show them what happens to species that resist the Empire." But in hidden bunkers and ruined cities across Earth, humans were already planning their next moves. They had learned something important in the first day of war. The aliens were powerful, but they were not gods. They could be surprised. They could be confused. And maybe, just maybe, they could be beaten. Dr. Kane worked through the night analyzing alien communication patterns. She had found something that gave her hope. The Zephyrians had never fought a long war before. All their previous conquests had ended quickly. They were not prepared for the kind of resistance humans could provide. The real war was just beginning. 3 months had passed since the Zephyrian invasion began. The aliens controlled Earth's major cities, but they were learning that controlling territory and controlling humans were very different things. Every day brought new attacks from resistance. Groups that seemed to appear and disappear like ghosts. Lieutenant Kate Morgan crouched in the ruins of what used to be a shopping mall in Detroit. Her team had been studying alien patrol patterns for weeks. She had discovered something important about their enemy. The Zephyrians relied on computers to predict human behavior, but their programs kept failing. "They expect us to run when they show force," she explained to her squad. "They expect us to attack their strongest points. They expect us to follow military rules, but we don't have to do what they expect. Her radio crackled with a message from the Underground Resistance Network. Dr. Amy Foster's team had finally created weapons that could penetrate alien shields. The first shipment was being smuggled through the tunnel systems beneath Chicago. Dr. Foster worked in a hidden laboratory that had once been a subway station. Her team of scientists and engineers had spent months reverse engineering captured alien technology. The breakthrough had come when they stopped trying to copy Zephyrian designs and started thinking like humans instead. Their shields work by predicting incoming attacks and adapting to block them, she explained to a group of resistance leaders. But they can't adapt to truly random patterns. Our new weapons change frequency in ways that no computer can predict. The first test came during a raid on an alien supply depot in Phoenix. Commander Rick Stone led a team of volunteers armed with the new weapons. When they opened fire, the alien shields flickered and failed. For the first time since the invasion began, human weapons were hurting their enemies. Rick watched Zephyrian soldiers fall and felt something he had not experienced in months. Hope. "Tell Dr. Foster it works," he radioed back to base. "Tell her to make more, a lot more." Word of the successful attack spread through the resistance network faster than any alien communication system. In hidden bases around the world, humans began building the new weapons using parts salvaged from destroyed alien equipment and materials stolen from enemy supply lines. Mary Clark had been a civilian engineer before the invasion. Now she worked in a factory hidden beneath the ruins of Seattle, teaching others how to build explosives using alien power cells and human ingenuity. Her designs spread through resistance networks faster than the aliens could track them. "Every human settlement can become a weapons factory," she told her students. "We don't need big manufacturing plants. We need thousands of small workshops that they can't find and destroy." The psychological impact on Zephyrian forces was immediate. For the first time in their empire's history, they faced an enemy that was becoming stronger instead of weaker over time. Soldiers who had conquered dozens of worlds began requesting transfers away from Earth duty. War champion Krelu reported to High Admiral Vexstar with growing frustration. "My lord, the humans are not following any known pattern of resistance. When we destroy one of their groups, 2 more appear. When we capture their weapons, they build new ones. When we predict their attacks, they do something completely different." Vexstar studied the tactical displays showing human resistance activity. Red dots marked attacks across the planet. There were hundreds of them. "How many troops have we lost?" "More in 3 months on this primitive world than in the last 10 conquests combined. The humans fight like they have nothing to lose." What the aliens didn't understand was that humans did have something to lose, everything, and that made them more dangerous than any enemy the Zephyrian Empire had ever faced. Captain Susan Price led a raid on an alien command post in the ruins of Miami. Her team moved through flooded streets and collapsed buildings with ease. They knew this terrain better than any computer map could show. When they struck, it was fast and devastating, but the real victory came when they captured intact alien communication equipment. For the first time, humans could listen to enemy transmissions and understand their plans. Dr. Lisa Kane worked with a team of linguists and computer specialists to decode Zephyrian communications. What they discovered changed everything. The aliens were not just trying to conquer Earth. They were trying to understand why their conquest was failing. "Listen to this," she told the Underground Council of Resistance leaders. "They're asking their home fleet for advice on fighting humans. They've never had to do that before." The intercepted messages revealed something else important. The Zephyrian Empire ruled through fear and the appearance of invincibility. Other conquered species believed resistance was hopeless because no one had ever successfully fought back. But humans were proving that the Empire could be hurt. Major Julie Adams coordinated the first large-scale counterattack using captured alien ships. Human pilots had learned to fly Zephyrian fighters by studying wreckage and captured equipment. They couldn't match alien technology, but they could use human tactics that no computer could predict. The attack on a Zephyrian supply convoy was completely successful. Human pilots used random flight patterns and unpredictable maneuvers that confused alien targeting systems. When the convoy was destroyed, the psychological impact spread far beyond Earth, on distant worlds. Enslaved species watched secret broadcasts showing humans destroying Zephyrian ships. For the first time in generations, they saw that resistance was possible. The Empire's greatest weapon, the belief that fighting back was hopeless, was beginning to crack. Sergeant Don Woods had spent months learning to fight in the tunnel systems. Beneath New York, his teams used the city's infrastructure like a weapon against the invaders. They struck from manholes and vanished into storm drains. They used the aliens' own inability to understand human cities against them. They know our technology, he explained to new recruits, but they don't know our world. Every street corner is a potential ambush. Every building is a fortress. Every tunnel is an escape route. The cumulative effect of thousands of small victories was beginning to show. Zephyrian forces that had once moved freely across Earth's surface now traveled in large groups with heavy escorts. They were afraid. High Admiral Vexstar received an unprecedented message from the Zephyrian High Command. They wanted a detailed report on why Earth's conquest was taking so long. In the Empire's 1,000-year history, no single world had resisted for more than a few weeks. Tell them, Vexstar said to his communications officer, that humans are unlike any species we have encountered. They do not fight to win. They fight because they refuse to lose. I do not know how to defeat an enemy that becomes stronger when it should become weaker. But on Earth, humans were learning that strength didn't come from superior weapons or numbers. It came from something the Zephyrian Empire had never understood: the absolute refusal to give up. The willingness to sacrifice everything for freedom. The knowledge that some things were worth dying for. Dr. Amy Foster looked at the production reports from resistance factories hidden across the planet. Weapons production was increasing every week. More importantly, human tactics were evolving faster than alien countermeasures could adapt. We're not just fighting back anymore, she told the Resistance Council. We're winning. Above Earth's atmosphere, Zephyrian ships maintained their positions, but their commanders were beginning to doubt. For the first time in the Empire's history, they faced an enemy that refused to accept defeat. And that refusal was becoming contagious across the galaxy. 1 year after the Zephyrian invasion began, the world looked nothing like it had before. Cities lay in ruins, but from those ruins, something new was emerging. Humanity had transformed from helpless victims into a resistance force that was making the galaxy's greatest empire nervous. Captain Susan Price stood on the bridge of a captured Zephyrian fighter craft. Her team had spent 6 months learning to operate alien technology, but they had done more than just copy it. They had improved it. Human engineers had modified the ship's systems in ways that the original designers never imagined. All teams report. Ready? Came the voice of Commander Rick Stone over the radio. Operation Sunrise is a go. The mission was ambitious beyond anything humans had attempted before. Intelligence gathered from intercepted alien communications had revealed the location of a major Zephyrian command ship orbiting the dark side of the moon. The ship coordinated all invasion forces on Earth and contained detailed information about alien fleet movements across the solar system. Susan's modified fighter led a squadron of captured alien ships toward the target. The irony was not lost on her that humans were using Zephyrian technology to attack Zephyrians. But that was what made humans dangerous. They didn't just adapt to their environment. They made their environment adapt to them, the command ships. Sensors detected the approaching fighters but identified them as friendly forces returning from patrol. By the time the aliens realized their mistake, human pilots were already inside their defensive perimeter. The battle was swift and decisive. Human pilots used flight patterns that confused alien computer systems. They struck from angles that Zephyrian tactics didn't account for. Most importantly, they fought with a desperation and creativity that no military manual could teach. When the command ship's shields failed under the unexpected assault, boarding parties led by Major Julie Adams breached the hull. The fighting Inside was brutal but brief. Zephyrian soldiers were trained to fight organized military forces, not humans who used improvised weapons and fought like cornered animals, the intelligence captured from the command. Ship changed everything, Dr. Ben. Carter worked around the clock to decode the alien databases. What he found was a complete map of Zephyrian operations across dozens of star systems. More importantly, he discovered something that gave humanity hope. The Empire is not as strong as they want us to believe, he reported to the Underground. Resistance Council. They rule through fear and the threat of overwhelming force, but their actual military strength is spread thin across hundreds of conquered worlds. The captured data revealed that most Zephyrian-controlled planets were guarded by small occupation forces. The aliens relied on the conquered species' belief that resistance was hopeless. They had never needed large armies because no one had ever fought back effectively, but humans were changing that equation. Every successful attack on Earth was being broadcast to other worlds through captured communication networks. Enslaved species that had submitted centuries ago were beginning to remember what freedom meant. Lieutenant Kate Morgan led a team of specialists who were learning to operate captured Zephyrian communication equipment. They had established contact with resistance groups on 3 other worlds. The response was immediate and electric. "We thought we were alone," came a transmission from the Rigel system. "We thought no one could fight the Empire. You have shown us that resistance is possible." The psychological impact was spreading faster than any military campaign. The Zephyrian Empire's greatest weapon had always been the belief that they were invincible. Humans were proving that belief wrong, and other species were taking notice. On Earth, the resistance had evolved from desperate survivors into an organized military force. Dr. Amy Foster's weapons factories were producing equipment that matched and sometimes exceeded Zephyrian technology. Human engineers had learned to think beyond the limitations that constrained alien designers. Mary Clark's improvised explosives had evolved into sophisticated weapons that used Zephyrian power sources more efficiently than the aliens' own equipment. Her designs incorporated human understanding of chaos theory and random patterns that alien computers couldn't predict or counter. The ground war was turning in humanity's favor. Sergeant Dan Woods now commanded a regiment of fighters who knew Earth's terrain better than any orbital survey could map. They used subway tunnels, storm drains, and abandoned buildings to create a network of hidden bases that the aliens couldn't locate or destroy. "We're not fighting their war anymore," he explained to a group of new recruits. "We're making them fight our war, and our war doesn't follow their rules." War champion Krelu found himself facing a situation he had never encountered in decades of conquest. His forces controlled the major population centers, but humans controlled everything else. Worse, his troops were being attacked by weapons that shouldn't exist and tactics that made no tactical sense. "They sacrifice themselves to save others," he reported to High Admiral Vexstar. "They fight harder when surrounded than when they have advantages. They use their own settlements as weapons against us. I do not understand how to defeat an enemy that fights without regard for logical military doctrine." What Krelu didn't understand was that humans weren't fighting according to military doctrine. They were fighting according to something deeper. The belief that freedom was worth any sacrifice. The knowledge that some things mattered more than survival. The breaking point came during the Battle of Chicago. Zephyrian forces had surrounded a group of human civilians, including children, in what remained of the city's downtown area. According to alien tactical calculations, the humans should have surrendered to save the non-combatants. Instead, every available resistance fighter in the region converged on the city. They fought through overwhelming enemy fire, not to win, but to buy time for the civilians to escape. When the battle was over, most of the fighters were dead, but every civilian had been saved. The aliens watched the recordings of the battle with something approaching fear. They had conquered dozens of species, but had never encountered anything like this. Humans didn't just fight for territory or resources. They fought for each other. And Tony Lewis had been a naval officer before the invasion. Now he commanded a growing fleet of captured and modified Zephyrian ships. His crews were learning to think like their enemies while retaining the unpredictability that made humans dangerous. "We have 17 operational fighters and 3 heavy cruisers," he reported to the Resistance High Command. "More importantly, we have crews who know how to use them." The first major space engagement came when Lewis's fleet intercepted a Zephyrian supply convoy heading for Earth. The aliens expected a conventional battle following standard tactical doctrine. Instead, they faced human pilots who had rewritten the rules of space combat. Human ships used patterns of movement that alien computers couldn't predict. They coordinated attacks in ways that no formal military training taught. Most importantly, they fought with the knowledge that they were not just defending Earth, but proving to the galaxy that the Empire could be beaten when the convoy was destroyed. The victory was broadcast across multiple star systems. On worlds that had been enslaved for centuries, people looked up at the sky and began to believe that freedom was possible. High Admiral Vexstar received an unprecedented order from the Zephyrian High Command. He was to request additional reinforcements from the Empire's Central Fleet. In 1,000 years of conquest, no single world had ever required such extensive resources to subdue. "Tell the High Command," he said to his communications officer, "that Earth requires special consideration. The humans are unlike any species we have encountered. They do not fight to avoid defeat. They fight to achieve victory. I do not know how long it will take to break such an enemy." But on Earth, humans were discovering that they might not need to break their enemy. The captured intelligence suggested that the Zephyrian Empire was built on the assumption that resistance was futile. If enough worlds began fighting back, the Empire might collapse under its own weight. Dr. Lisa Kane studied the communications intercepts with growing excitement. "They're afraid," she told the Resistance Council. "For the first time in their history, they're questioning whether they can win. And that fear is spreading through their ranks faster than any weapon we could build." The hunters were becoming the hunted. The species that had ruled through fear was beginning to feel fear themselves. And at the center of this transformation was a planet full of creatures that refused to accept defeat no matter what the odds. 2 years had passed since the first Zephyrian ships appeared in Earth's sky. The planet that the aliens expected to conquer in days had become their worst nightmare. What should have been a simple addition to their empire had turned into a war that was reshaping the galaxy. Admiral Tony Lewis stood in the command center of the captured Zephyrian battleship that now served as humanity's flagship. The ship had been renamed Freedom's Dawn, and its hull bore scars from dozens of battles. Around him, human officers operated alien technology with an expertise that surprised even themselves. "Sir, long-range sensors are detecting movement in the asteroid belt," reported his navigation officer. "Looks like another Zephyrian supply fleet trying to reach their orbital stations." Tony smiled grimly. 6 months ago, such news would have meant overwhelming enemy reinforcements. Now it meant another opportunity to capture ships and supplies. The humans had learned to turn every alien advantage into a weakness. "Signal all squadron commanders," he ordered. "We intercept in 4 hours. Remember, we want those ships intact. Dead aliens can't tell us their secrets." The transformation of human space forces had been remarkable. What started as captured fighters and desperate crews had evolved into a fleet that could challenge Zephyrian naval supremacy. More importantly, human tactics had evolved beyond anything the aliens could counter. Dr. Lisa Kane worked in the intelligence center that had been built inside a hollowed-out mountain in Colorado. Banks of captured alien computers processed information from across the galaxy. Her team had become experts at reading Zephyrian military communications and what they were. Learning was changing everything. "The Empire is fracturing," she reported to President Helen Cross during their daily briefing. 3 systems have stopped responding to Central Command. The Rigel colonies have declared independence. Reports from the Centauri sector suggest open rebellion. The president studied the star charts showing areas of Zephyrian control. Red zones marked territories in open revolt, while yellow areas indicated unreliable communication with the Empire's Central Command. "How much of this is because of us?" "All of it," Lisa replied. Every human victory gets broadcast across their communication networks. Every time we prove they can be beaten, another world finds the courage to fight back. The breakthrough had come when Dr. Ben Carter discovered how to hack Zephyrian computer networks. Human programmers didn't think like aliens. Where Zephyrian systems relied on logic and predictable patterns, humans introduced chaos and randomness that crashed alien computers or made them behave in unexpected ways. General Paul Young coordinated the largest military operation in human history from his command post beneath the ruins of London. After 2 years of guerrilla warfare, humanity was finally ready to drive the invaders completely off their planet. All resistance cells report ready, came reports from commanders around the world. New York, Los Angeles, Moscow, Beijing, Sydney. Every major city has underground forces prepared to strike simultaneously. The plan was ambitious beyond anything previously attempted. Rather than attacking Zephyrian positions individually, every human resistance group would strike at the same moment. The aliens would face coordinated attacks from thousands of different locations with no way to predict or counter them all. Lieutenant Kate Morgan led her team through the subway tunnels beneath Washington, D.C. Her mission was to capture the alien communication center that coordinated all Zephyrian ground forces in North America. Success would blind the enemy to human movements across half the continent. Remember, she told her soldiers, we're not just fighting for Earth anymore. We're fighting for every enslaved world in the galaxy. Today we show the universe that the Empire can be broken. The attack began exactly at noon, Greenwich Mean Time, across Earth. Hidden resistance forces emerged from tunnels, ruined buildings, and secret bases. They struck with weapons that had been built in underground factories and tactics that had been refined through 2 years of desperate fighting. Sergeant Don Woods led the assault on the Zephyrian fortress that had been built over the ruins of the Pentagon. His troops moved through passages they had spent months carving through the rubble. When they emerged inside the alien perimeter, the defenders were caught completely off guard. The psychological effect was immediate and devastating. Zephyrian forces that had grown accustomed to controlling Earth's surface suddenly found themselves under attack from every direction. Their tactical computers crashed trying to process thousands of simultaneous threats. War champion Krelu watched his carefully organized defenses collapse in real time. His communication links to orbital command went dead as human forces overran relay stations. His supply lines were cut as resistance fighters destroyed convoys that had traveled the same routes safely for months. All units retreat to orbital extraction points, he ordered, but the command couldn't reach most of his forces. The humans had learned to disrupt Zephyrian communications in ways that alien engineers had never anticipated. Captain Susan Price flew one of 50 captured fighters that launched the final assault on Zephyrian orbital stations. The aliens still held space around Earth, but their ground forces were in full retreat. It was time to complete the victory. The space battle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human pilots used their ships in ways that violated every principle of Zephyrian naval doctrine. They rammed enemy vessels, used debris fields as weapons, and coordinated attacks through methods that alien computers couldn't track or predict. When the last Zephyrian orbital station fell, High Admiral Vexstar faced a situation that no commander in the Empire's history had confronted. He had been completely driven from a planet by the species he had come to conquer. Signal the home fleet, he ordered his remaining officers. Request immediate evacuation of all Imperial forces from the Sol system. Earth is lost. But losing Earth was just the beginning of the Empire's problems. News of humanity's complete victory spread across the galaxy faster than any Zephyrian warship could travel. On 100 worlds, enslaved species watched broadcasts showing humans celebrating in the ruins of alien fortresses. Dr. Amy Foster stood in her laboratory surrounded by weapons and equipment that had been impossible to imagine 3 years earlier. Human technology had leaped forward centuries in just 24 months of desperate innovation. But the greatest breakthrough was not technological. We've proven something important, she told the gathering of Earth's leaders. Superior technology doesn't guarantee victory. Superior will does. And no empire in the galaxy has stronger will than free people fighting for their freedom. Commander Rick Stone led the first human expedition beyond the solar system. His modified ships carried a message to every enslaved world they could reach. Earth had shown that the Zephyrian Empire could be defeated. Now it was time to help others achieve their own freedom. The expedition's first destination was the Rigel system, where intelligence reports indicated active rebellion against Zephyrian rule. When human ships arrived, they found a population ready to fight but lacking the weapons and knowledge to succeed. "We're here to help," Rick broadcast to the rebel leaders. "Earth stands with everyone fighting for freedom." The Empire thought. We were alone and helpless. Let's show them how wrong they were. Back on Earth, President Cross addressed a planet that was scarred but unbroken. Cities were being rebuilt with new designs that incorporated lessons learned during the occupation. Underground networks that had carried resistance fighters now served as foundations for structures that could never be completely destroyed. "We have won the first victory," she told humanity. "But our war is not over. Across the galaxy, billions of people still live under Imperial rule. They have watched us prove that freedom is possible. Now they're looking to us for help in achieving their own liberation." High Admiral Vextar's fleet retreated to the edge of the solar system but found no safety there. Human ships pursued them relentlessly using captured alien technology and tactics that no Imperial training had prepared them for. For the first time in his career, Vextar was not hunting prey. He was running from predators. How is this possible? He asked his tactical officer. They were primitives. They had no space fleet, they had no technology. How did they become the hunters? The answer was something the Zephyrian Empire had never understood. Technology could be captured or copied. Ships could be built or stolen. But the human spirit, the absolute refusal to accept defeat, the willingness to sacrifice everything for freedom, that could not be conquered. As human ships spread across the galaxy carrying weapons and hope to enslaved worlds, the empire that had ruled through fear for 1,000 years began to experience fear themselves. The species they had dismissed as primitive animals had become their greatest nightmare. The hunters had become the hunted. And the hunt was just beginning. 5 years had passed since the first Zephyrian ship appeared over Earth. The galaxy was no longer the same place. Where once the Empire had ruled through unchallenged fear, now their ships fled at the first sign of human vessels. The species they had dismissed as primitive animals had become the greatest threat to their 1,000-year reign. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the starship New Earth, flagship of the Free Human Fleet. Around him, displays showed the locations of human task forces across 12 star systems. Each group was leading liberation campaigns on worlds that had been enslaved for centuries. "Sir, we're receiving surrender requests from Zephyrian forces in the Vega system," reported his communications officer. "They're asking for terms." Jake looked at the star chart showing human advances across the galaxy. Red dots marked worlds freed from Imperial control, while blue indicated ongoing liberation campaigns. The expansion was accelerating as more species joined the fight for freedom. "Tell them the same terms we give everyone," he replied. "Complete withdrawal from all occupied worlds and reparations to the species they enslaved. They get to live free under the same conditions they offered their victims." The irony was not lost on anyone that humans were offering better surrender terms than the Zephyrians had ever given. But that was what separated the liberators from the conquerors. Humans fought for freedom, not domination. Dr. Amy Foster worked in the advanced research station that orbited Earth's moon. Her team had revolutionized galactic technology by applying human creativity to alien science. Ships that emerged from her facilities were faster, stronger, and more innovative than anything the Empire had ever built. "The latest modifications to our shield generators are complete," she reported to Fleet Command. "Human ships can now survive direct hits from Zephyrian dreadnought weapons. More importantly, our new engines allow us to outrun anything they have." But technology was only part of humanity's advantage. The real strength came from something the Empire could never copy or counter. Human crews fought with passion for a cause they believed in, while Zephyrian forces served through fear and obligation. Commander Rick Stone led the Liberation Fleet approaching the Zephyrian home system. Intelligence gathered from captured ships and defeated commanders had revealed the location of the Empire's capital world. After 5 years of chase across the galaxy, the final confrontation was at hand. "All ships report ready," came the voices of human captains commanding vessels from dozens of liberated worlds. The fleet included not just human crews but volunteers from every species that had been freed from Imperial rule. Captain Susan Price commanded a squadron of ships crewed entirely by former Zephyrian slaves. These aliens had spent their lives serving the Empire but had joined the liberation forces when they learned that freedom was possible. They fought with the determination of people who had everything to gain and nothing left to lose. The battle for the Zephyrian capital began when human scouts detected the Empire's last great fleet gathering to defend their homeworld. What followed was the largest space engagement in galactic history. But it was not the desperate fight the aliens expected. Human tactics had evolved far beyond anything Imperial strategists could predict. Ships moved in patterns that seemed random but followed principles of chaos theory that human mathematicians had perfected. They struck from directions that violated conventional space warfare doctrine and used weapons and combinations that alien computers couldn't analyze fast enough to counter. Lieutenant Kate Morgan, now a fleet captain, led the assault on the orbital fortresses protecting the Zephyrian capital. Her ships moved through the enemy defenses like water flowing around rocks, always finding the path of least resistance and maximum damage. "Remember," she broadcast to her squadron, "we're not here for revenge. We're here to free the last enslaved world in the galaxy. That includes the Zephyrians themselves." The breakthrough came when human boarding parties captured the primary Imperial command station. For the first time in their history, Zephyrian civilians saw their own military defeated by the species they had been taught to consider inferior. The psychological impact was immediate and complete. High Admiral Vextar found himself surrounded in his command center by human soldiers led by Major Julie Adams. The warrior who had expected to conquer Earth in days now faced the species that had brought down his entire empire. "You have lost," Julie told him simply. "Your fleets are destroyed, your worlds are free, and your empire is finished. The only question now is whether you choose to surrender with dignity or continue fighting a war you cannot win." Vextar looked around at his defeated officers and the humans who had accomplished the impossible. "How?" he asked. "How did a primitive species destroy an empire that ruled for 1,000 years?" "You made one mistake," Julie replied. "You thought strength came from superior technology and overwhelming force. But real strength comes from something you never understood. The willingness to fight for something bigger than yourself." President Helen Cross, now leader of the Galactic Liberation Council, addressed the assembled representatives of 47 formerly enslaved species. The meeting was held on Earth in a great hall built from materials donated by every liberated world. "5 years ago we faced extinction," she said to the gathering. The Zephyrian Empire seemed unstoppable. They had conquered dozens of worlds and enslaved billions of people. But they made one fatal error. They underestimated the power of the human spirit and the desire for freedom that lives in every intelligent being. The Zephyrian surrender came not through military defeat alone, but through the collapse of everything their society was built on. Generations of Zephyrians had been taught that their empire was natural and inevitable. When humans proved that it could be destroyed, the psychological foundation of their civilization crumbled. Dr. Ben Carter worked with teams of social scientists from across the galaxy to understand how the Empire had maintained control for so long. The answer was simple but profound. They had convinced everyone, including themselves, that resistance was impossible. Fear was their greatest weapon, he explained to the council. Not fear of death, but fear of hope. They made people afraid to believe that things could be different. Once we showed that change was possible, their power evaporated. Sergeant Dan Woods, now General Woods, established the Galactic Defense Academy on Earth. Former Imperial soldiers learned alongside resistance fighters from liberated worlds. The curriculum focused not on conquest but on protection of freedom. "We're not building an empire," he told the first class of students. "We're building something new. A galaxy where every species can determine its own destiny without fear of conquest or enslavement." The final chapter came when the last Zephyrian military units laid down their weapons on their homeworld. Some chose to integrate into the new galactic civilization while others retreated to isolated colonies. But their empire was finished forever. Dr. Lisa Kane stood in the communication center that now coordinated peaceful contact between hundreds of worlds. The same networks that had once carried Imperial commands now carried messages of trade, friendship, and mutual aid between species that had been enemies for centuries. "We've accomplished something that seemed impossible," she reported to the Council. "We've broken the cycle of conquest and domination that has ruled this galaxy for millennia. We've proven that cooperation is stronger than subjugation." Captain Tony Lewis commanded the patrol fleets that maintained peace across the liberated systems. But these were not occupation forces. They were protectors who helped newly free worlds defend themselves while they built their own military capabilities. The transformation was complete when the former Zephyrian capital was converted into a center for galactic education and cultural exchange. The palace where imperial rulers had planned conquests became a university where young beings from every species learned to work together. Mary Clark, whose improvised explosives had helped start the resistance, now led the engineering teams rebuilding damaged worlds. The same creativity that had been used to fight oppression was now employed to create prosperity and freedom. Admiral Jake Morrison looked out at the stars from his office on Earth and marveled at how much had changed. 5 years ago, humanity had faced extinction at the hands of a seemingly unstoppable empire. Now they led a galactic civilization based on freedom and cooperation. The species that had been dismissed as primitive animals had become the guardians of galactic liberty. The empire that had ruled through fear now existed only in history books as a warning of what happened when power was used to oppress rather than protect. Hi. Admiral Vextar spent his final years writing memoirs that became required reading in schools across the galaxy. His analysis of why the Empire fell became the definitive study of how seemingly invincible systems could collapse when confronted by determined resistance. "We thought we were hunting sheep," he wrote in his conclusion. "We discovered we were facing wolves. But more than that, we learned that the human capacity for hope and resistance could not be conquered by any weapon or defeated by any technology. We underestimated them, and that underestimation destroyed us. The galaxy was free. The age of conquest was over."